wherever you are in the world. I'm David Valent, IATEFL YLTSIG Coordinator, and I'd like to warmly welcome you all to the 2020 IATEFL YLTSIG Web Conference. The IATEFL YLTSIG Committee would like to sincerely thank our 2020 sponsor, StudyCat. Without the support of Paul Granger and the StudyCat team, this global event would not have been possible. You can sign up for a free StudyCat trial account with instant access to award-winning games and activities to engage young learners of English at studycat.com/schools. Our next speaker then is Canan Marasligil, who's giving our first Inspire session of this web conference. Canan, a feminist writer, artist, literary translator, performer, editor, podcaster, and cultural programs curator based in the Netherlands. Her interests are in challenging official narratives and advocating freedom of expression through a wide range of creative projects and activities, from literature to film to comics. You can find out more on her website, and Letitia's going to put those in the chat box now. During Canan's session, we recommend watching in speaker view. So without any further ado, take it away, Canan. Please share your screen.
Hi, everyone.
I think we lost you, Canan. Are you there?
I'm here, but it doesn't want to share my application, so I'm going to share my whole screen. So you're going to be able to see my whole desktop. So let's see. Let's see if this works. Does everybody see my presentation now?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you. So I'll do it like this. Thank you very much, David. So today I'm going to talk about city in translation, reclaiming urban spaces through translation. In L'Imaginaire des Langues, a series of interviews between Louise Gauvin and writer Édouard Glissant, Glissant tells how today a writer who does not know any other language does take into account when writing, even unconsciously, the existence of other languages around her. One can no longer write a language in a monolingual manner. He says, we have to take into account the imaginary worlds of languages. City in Translation has started as a personal activity before turning into an artistic practice, bringing collaboration with institutions such as universities and publishing houses. It has been motivated by my ongoing conviction, just like Glissant's, that multilingualism is so much part of our context that it feeds us in many ways, sometimes even without us noticing its impact. My personal urge to look at cities through the lens of translation has been a key in the development of City in Translation as a project, including my own biography as a translator, or Why I Translate, which has brought me to the various activities based on the traces people live in urban spaces. In European Others, Queering Ethnicity in Post-National Europe, Fatima El Tayeb writes, the national often is the means by which exclusion takes place. Minorities are positioned beyond the horizon of national politics, culture, and history, frozen in the state of migration through the permanent designation of another foreign nationality that allows their definition as not Danish, Spanish, Hungarian, etc. This state of being constantly frozen in migration to discriminatory practices on different levels, personal, institutional, economic, or political, has also impacted on how multilingualism is experienced in cities. Born in a family of Turkish immigrants and growing up in the heart of Europe in bilingual Brussels, I have developed a certain sensitivity as to why some languages have been less valued within those various institutions than others. My immigrant background has been highly influential in shaping the translator I am today, and also my urge to take translation off the page and into the streets. My reality is rooted in motion between places, languages, emotions. It is constant and unpredictable. Throughout the years and through practicing various methodologies around city in translation, I have been able to affirm the following. I find myself in movement. In French, the word ou changes its definition with only one accent. Ou without an accent means or, whereas ou with an accent means where. I see this as a movement too, getting rid of the accent to transform place, where, into a choice, or. And it is one I have been embracing throughout this artistic practice because movement is also creativity. Translation as well is movement, physical and intellectual, between spaces and languages across geographies, cultural, political contexts. It is also a movement between emotions, people moving each other. I have the privilege to have acquired a European Union member citizenship next to my Turkish one in my early 20s. Since then, my freedom for movement has been expanded greatly. Not everyone has that same freedom, and one of my urges to translate the city comes from that acknowledgement and the need to use my own privilege to create spaces where creativity through translation can occur. I was not always aware of my yearning for movement until I was constantly reminded that I was never really home in Brussels and that my language was alien in the city where I grew up since my earliest memory. What they insisted on calling my mother tongue came to me through body and gestures. I have been looking for my language in so many ways because I was enjoined to reject her. That language I was born into has been made invisible for decades in these new lands where my family and I were just guests. Now, through my artistic practice, I'm trying to reclaim her alongside many other languages I do not know. I had no choice but to learn and speak my host languages. With time, I made them mine as well. In a sense, Turkish has become the mother of all my tongues and transformed me into the translator and artist I am today. I have turned my roots upwards. I have created the possibility of being from nowhere so that I could belong everywhere. Navigating urban spaces, looking for languages is one major way for me to achieve that. It has empowered me as a writer and an artist and as an individual. I have therefore developed ways to share this practice widely with others so that it can be a tool for empowerment, representation, and space reclamation for more people. Translation is at the center of everything I do as a practitioner, namely as a writer, a literary translator, and an artist working across media. Outside of the page, the city becomes my playground. I define myself as a flâneuse, the female equivalent of flâneur. Flânerie can be described as idle wandering, and it was mostly practiced by urban men in the mid-19th century metropolises. Renowned flâneurs include Charles Baudelaire, Walter Benjamin, Edgar Allan Poe, who all have provided descriptions of flânerie throughout their work. Following these flâneurs' practice, when I walk, I observe, I get lost, and I find myself in the many human traces left across urban spaces. This urge to leave its mark on the spaces we inhabit is not new in the history of humanity. The flâneuse will find many results of multilingual self-expression on shop windows, street names, billboards, advertisements, slogans, graffitis, clothes, artworks, trash, traffic signage, ghost signs, and more. The moment you start to look around you, you will never experience the spaces you occupy in the same way. In Walking the City, Michel de Certeau describes the act of walking as follows. The act of walking is to the urban system what the speech act is to language or to the statements uttered. What interests me here is the link between language and the physical act of walking, and how, in this essay, de Certeau tells in a way that by walking in the city, pedestrians are telling a story. This physical movement is central in City in Translation, and the stories that unfold from my exploration through walking that can be seen as an example to reclaim the stories that have been made invisible by institutions. Flaneusing in urban spaces in search of those stories is in itself an act of resistance against established structure and also power. There are many reasons to walk in a city: to get somewhere, for the pleasure itself to walk, to observe our environment, to protest, to see, to be seen, and to exist. The pace of walking is also determined by these reasons. One does not walk at the same pace if they need to catch a bus or do some grocery shopping right before dinner or look around and admire the architecture of their city. My pace usually goes against the established flow of the city. It's a sort of disruption, just like the graffiti that have been painted against the rules. They defy a certain order in the city and tell an untold story. It is what I'm trying to do to capture through my flaneusing. When I started City in Translation in Copenhagen, I organized my work by following discrete and complementary phases, which I also described on the project website. There's exploratory phases where I'm starting every act of walking with curiosity, bringing my personal point of view as a visitor with different backgrounds, languages, and perspectives, just like the flaneuse, as I explained. And throughout the first residency I did in Copenhagen, I have explored the city on foot, camera in hand, looking at languages other than Danish. This first phase has led to the creation of various materials, including written notes and photographs, and I have shared this process as well through social media. Then there's the collaborative stage. With the support of the University of Copenhagen, I met with local practitioners and attended several events and interacted closely with the university community. And then there is the reflective stage. When I came back after the residency, a time for reflection and evaluation was needed. I've therefore gathered all the materials collected and have done further research where needed in order to build the website and its content. Following the University of Copenhagen in 2015, I was invited in 2017 by the Lille-based independent publisher in France, La Contralée, to spend several days throughout the year at different moments to implement City in Translation with local institutions, including the University of Tourcoing and local libraries and bookshops. This work was followed by me being invited in 2018, 19, and 20 by Mines de Culture, an association based in the Bassin Minier, the former mining area in northern France, near Lille, to work with local communities, including libraries, local cultural venues, and make a TV reportage in partnership with a local channel. And universities in the UK, such as the University of East Anglia and Norwich and Lancaster University, have also welcomed me as a translator in residence to share these different ways I use translation off the page to engage with various communities and audiences. Each residency has led to a series of concrete outcomes and activities, all feeding one another. Following Copenhagen, I have developed an online platform which allowed me to build an archive of materials that I have used to create workshops and activities within my other residencies. The website is the space from which further work has been developed, such as these workshops, the city walks, publications, other events involving audiences outside digital space to create further opportunities for interaction. And then the social media platforms, and especially Instagram, act as an online documenting and archival space. Next to the accounts, I also use the hashtag City in Translation, which allows a collaborative way of documenting and archiving online. And I invite you all to share your City in Translations in the future using the hashtag. The immediacy of social media is now a daily and natural activity of mine. Everywhere I go, I can just capture a city in translation moment, and it is an ongoing process that has sometimes led to specific projects of its own, such as the Yearning for Turkish exhibition, which I will tell you more in a bit. And I should note that the dominant language of the project, the dominant language of expression has always been English, not because I exclude other languages, because that would be completely contradictory to what I'm trying to do. But one of the major reasons is, of course, that I can reach wide audiences using the English language, but also myself. It's my language of choice to express myself creatively. Now, I want to read you the very first post I published as part of my Copenhagen residency. I flew to Copenhagen from Amsterdam on Friday, 17 April 2015, to start a writer's residency at the university. I took all my languages, experience, and sensitivities to Copenhagen, and there I observed, learned, researched, and gained even more experiences. And emotions. I experienced lots of emotions. On my first day, I wandered through the city slowly, as I usually do in new places. I started collecting booklets, flyers, free newspapers, and all sorts of promotion and advertising for artistic cultural events. The Copenhagen Film Festival was on, and the next day of my arrival, there was a screening of The Cut by Turkish-German filmmaker Fatih Akın. He's been a favorite filmmaker of mine for a long time, ever since Gegendiwand. I had been longing to see The Cut since its premiere at the Venice Film Festival. It was never released in Amsterdam. I felt so lucky to be able to catch it in Copenhagen, my new host city. So this cinematic encounter is very important because it links to all the points I made regarding representation and my own personal history as the daughter of Turkish immigrants in Brussels. I continue this post writing about the shock, which, as you can see on the screen, I prefer to spell in French, shock. I have experienced in hearing the different languages, from the screening room of the Danish Film Institute to the streets outside as I was walking back home on my second night after starting this residency. I was hearing Turkish, Armenian, French, Danish, all mixed in my imagination. I wanted to highlight the importance of languages linked to emotions as I started this journey exploring the languages of Copenhagen in urban space. So my post continues like this. That initial shock reminded how central the role of emotion was as part of my exploration. I was going to search for stories behind the different languages expressed throughout the city, mostly through text posted on surfaces, walls, windows, floors, cars, bridges, boats, but also told in conversations, in music, in sign language, sometimes making the invisible visible through sound and gesture. Throughout this journey of acquiring different languages and feeding myself with a wide range of stories from a variety of places, I have realized how big of an emotional impact Turkish has had on me. Every other language that followed, that I learned to master and love, was always in some way reaching back to Turkish. For the first time, and 2 years exactly after its inception, City in Translation presented an exhibition called Yearning for Turkish. The exhibition was commissioned as part of the Transartation program, which aimed to foster community involvement in investigating how translation stimulated and provoked the production of text objects and works of visual art, and to make visible the kinds of conversations that could occur between different cultures, languages, and modes of expression. And this exhibition took place in 2017 in St. Andrews in Scotland and in Norwich. And the moment I was asked about creating an exhibition around City in Translation, I knew that I had to find a red thread, that I couldn't just throw a few images and text that fitted into the overall theme. I wanted to tell a story, and my focus was the Turkish language. I had been collecting images showing the Turkish language across cities I visited since the very beginning, and I would share them on social media, as I explained earlier. As the number of moments I captured started growing, a specific theme was beginning to take shape, but moreover, it was a focused search that had been embedded in my artistic practice. As I looked at all these images, I understood this was some sort of yearning for a language and everything it brings and means. And yearning for Turkish was thus born. The exhibition started with the following words of mine. There's a language I was born into, a language my mother, my father spoke to me in. They still do. A language I use every day, uniting with my many others. Moving, I see it everywhere I go. A language I translate from. When I walk in cities, I see, I feel, I imagine this language. It is a language of my heart that I yearn for constantly. And the accompanying image for this short introduction was one I took when I was on a train from Brussels to London while we were in movement, leaving the station. I captured it as I saw a Turkish flag hanging down a window of a building. A flag may not be considered a word or a sentence to translate, but in my mind, it worked on many levels because the image itself offered the possibility for multiple interpretations. I see yearning for Turkish as one example that shows how one can reclaim urban spaces and certain cultures and languages through their own imagination. In this sense, City in Translation can be an empowering tool for people, especially to those coming from communities whose languages have been overlooked by mainstream culture and policies. Now, I would like to share 3 examples from the exhibition Yearning for Turkish to illustrate how this reclaiming process can take place. The first photograph was taken in Copenhagen. It includes an actual Turkish word, pınar, and the accompanying text is titled Homesick. When I was a kid growing up in Brussels, we would go rent movies with my parents in the Turkish neighborhood. 25 years later, I wander the street of gentrified Vesterpol, and I find myself surrounded with VHS and Betamax again. Only the videos are now flowers, and the golden Pınar video sign a trophy of gentrification. Pınar means spring or source in Turkish. It's also a female name. I imagine a tiny Danish version of myself inside the shop, picking a movie with her parents. Instead of mixing Turkish with French while speaking, she mixes her parents' tongue with her perfect Danish. Every week, they laugh, cry, and fall in love at the pace of Turkish melodrama and comedy, easing the gentle pain of homesickness, one VHS at a time. The second photograph was taken in Wales, and neither of the words appearing on it, slow and araf, are in Turkish, at least not in this context. This is the accompanying text, which is titled Purgatory. I'm in a bus that left London 5 hours ago. It is late, and I'm sleepy and nauseous. As we ride across a forest, I see the words, araf and slow, appearing and disappearing under the vehicle's nervous headlights. I start wondering if I'm dreaming or if my nausea is playing tricks on me. I blink once, twice, thrice. You see, araf in Turkish means purgatory. And the third example was taken in Athens, and it has absolutely no Turkish word in the picture, as you can see. It has only the words, "Not all who wander are lost," and it includes a little girl in the corner of the frame. The text bears the same title as the graffiti. It was the first time I had been to Athens. As I was wandering the streets, I came across a shop called Flâneur, almost a personal invitation to enter. The owner, Janice, welcomed me warmly. All around were locally handmade works, each of them with a story. As we talked about traveling and our cities, I told Janice I was born in Turkey. My grandfather is from Kayseri, he said. His uncle found a family home back in Turkey 10 years ago. He added that he would like to go someday. His grandmother was from Antalya. They met in Greece. At that time, refugees would stick together. They had no other choice, he added. We talked about the relationship between Greece and Turkey, about our common history. Then Janice said he was very sad about what was happening in Turkey. I hope things will get better. Me too. And I hope better days will come to Greece as well. We're so close to one another, aren't we? Said Janice. Yes, I nodded. We are very close, closer than we ever think. So these are examples of how, through the city translation artistic practice, one can reclaim its own city spaces, using translation and their own imagination. Throughout this exploration, I inhabit spaces, document and imagine conversations. And more importantly, all these spaces, they become mine. Here, Turkish becomes visible in places where it would have never existed if I did not walk by. I'd like to end this talk by focusing on my residency in the Bassin Minier, so the former mining area in northern France, where I was invited several times between 2018 and 2020 to work on different levels around multilingualism and creative writing. While I do not only use the city translation methodology for each workshop, every single activity has been inspired by my initial urge to reclaim stories and spaces through celebrating multilingualism. This understanding is also shared with the association Mine de Culture and its president, Suzy Balcerek, in a very complex cultural, socioeconomic, and political context that is the Bassin Minier. It is important here to highlight that the town where Mine de Culture is based, called Hénin-Beaumont, has been led by extreme right mayor from the Front National since 2014. This residency experience has been the most meaningful in the frame of city in translation, as I could concretely see every gesture that I believed was important in my own personal and artistic journey, which could matter to more people on the personal and the professional levels. For the very last activity I did during this residency, we worked with a local TV channel to organize interviews with locals and their neighborhoods to talk about their relationship with space and languages. One of the interviews was particularly moving when a mother and her daughter told about their use of French and Spanish to communicate and connect emotionally. The mother came from Argentina more than 2 decades ago after she met a French miner in her hometown and decided to follow him to the Bassin Minier. She had to learn French after she moved. Her daughter grew up with French and only started learning and using Spanish later in her life. She felt this urge after a visit to Argentina, where she was unable to communicate with members of her family. But her mother has always focused on French for her children so that they could integrate into French society. This narrative is omnipresent in the French discourse, where a unique culture is celebrated over diversity. The mother and daughter started crying as they shared their love for both their countries and their languages. Once again, celebrating diversity through our multilingual stories creates a space where everyone has the freedom to express themselves and reclaim all their identities. This is how I see city in translation evolving from the visual aspect of seeing multilingualism in cities to the act of storytelling and capturing the hidden stories of diversity and multilingualism through another methodology. I think more and more city in translation can become a tool to help create our collective stories through cities, countries, across borders, where our common space is a constant movement between languages. Through my explorations, I inhabit cities, sometimes just for a short period of time. I capture moments, document and archive them, and make many words I see mine. For many times when I return to the same place, an ephemeral sentence I captured on camera may have disappeared because it was a graffiti or a sticker stuck on a lamppost. But thanks to my gesture, it remains in my personal archives, or it's published online, or on the site, or on Instagram, or at the page of City in Translation. It is reinterpreted in my own way through the lens of my own biography. Languages move and texts become alive when they are read, shared, written, and rewritten. Solidarity becomes tangible when people from all backgrounds and with different biographies in a neighborhood are brought together around a table and asked to observe the languages in our environment and translate them, even if they are completely new to them. These languages exist and can be visible to those who are willing to see. Through these urban walks and workshops, I'm trying to liberate the imaginary worlds of languages, and therefore aim to create the possibility to step out of the idea that the world is monolingual, no matter how many languages we ourselves know.
Canan,
thank you very much. Yes.
Thank you so much for your inspiring session. It's a really refreshing focus for us, and really looking at cityscapes and what we can learn about how language is used, and really interesting how language reflects multiple identities, so multiple languages, and how they really are expressions of deep identity. I think it's very important for English teachers of children and teenagers to remember the children's languages other than English, and teenagers' languages other than English, that they bring with them as reflections of different aspects of their identity in the English language classroom, and how to foster that multilingual identity. So thank you so much for a fascinating session today. I'm sure everyone found that really inspiring.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, we're going to take a very short break now, just